Okay, let's have a look at Ravelry. And you will see that I have just done a search for Ravelry, and I am going to click and open it up. When we go into this, I will already be signed in because I signed in fairly recently, and you can see up here is my logo or my profile and setting. And then there are lots of features, many of which I'm not going to go into today. But what I do want you to be aware of is you have a notebook, and in that you can save favourites and you can have a library. So when you see something that you like, you can click on a heart, which is on the actual pattern or the images that you've got as you're looking up for patterns and projects, and it will save it to your favourites. And then your library will be things that you've either purchased or you've added to your library if it was a free pattern. You can add in your projects, and you can put the things you want to do in the future in your queue. You can add in your yarn stash and put what details you have in there. I don't use handspun and I don't use tools, but that's what you'll find under your notebook. Along the top, I have a pro account because I have my designs on Ravelry, but of course you most likely won't unless you've done the same. And then along here there's details for you to put your posts and find them from the forums, because there are like question and answer forums in there, emails and patterns that I've purchased with updates. I have an advanced search pattern, so you can see here it gives you lots of different things you can be searching for, but on the whole what we tend to do is we tend to search for a pattern. So I'm going to click onto patterns, and you will then see you can search for it by name and by the designer. You could just be looking for a hat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an idea how you can search for a hat and try and stick with the yarn that you have at home. So I'm going to click on hat. And there are 58,622 matches for hat, and in here it tells you that the craft that I'm looking at is crochet. So if we look down the side where we've got the filter your search, so you can select the filters there, or you can go down and see which different filters there are. So under availability, it means is it something that you can get for free? Is it something you can purchase? Can you print it up? Is it a download? Is it being discontinued? So hopefully you can see in my library I've got 235 hats. Probably won't have made all of them. You can choose crochet knitting, machine knitting and loom knitting. And you can also, instead of trying to search through all the hats, you can think, I know I've got some in my library or in my favourites, or that I've recently looked at, or whatever it might be, and you'll notice the numbers, so it tells you how many of those are. And what I don't have is any under my projects or my favourite designers, because I haven't allocated that. As you go further down, it allows you then to choose like clothing, accessories, so any of the categories, if it's a toy or a hobby. So if you wanted to make a pet hat, for example, you could click on pets, so we can say all pets, and then that will filter it down to hats for pets, which is very cute. I'm going to clear that, so I can clear that by clicking there to remove the filter, or I can go along and remove it that way. Doesn't matter, whichever you choose to do, you're just getting rid of the checkbox for it. There's pattern source, so did it come in a book or a magazine? Is it on a website or an ebook, a booklet? And then as you go further down, I think these are the things that as newbies, this is really interesting to see, because what will happen most likely is you will develop a small stash, and that will get bigger and bigger as time goes on, and think, well, I've no idea what to do with it. So whilst it will give you needle size and what sort of yarn fibres that you might be using in a project. Remember, if you're making a hat, you can make it from pretty much any yarn fibre you want to. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to this section here where it says weight. So this is always generally quite confusing. On the whole, we are going to use double knit worsted aran, and we may go to bulky, super bulky and jumbo. fingering and sports weight. So a sports weight is a 5 weight and a fingering is a 4 weight, so there's not going to be much difference in that, and light fingering is a 3 weight. And then after that we start going down to very thin yarns, which if you're a starter I'm not going to be encouraging you to use. So what I will do is I will click on, I'm going to do worsted and aran, because worsted is slightly thicker yarn than aran, but just very slightly, so it wouldn't really make much of a difference. I can choose a design if I wish to. I can also look at what difficulty is it. So if you're thinking, do you know what, I don't want it to be too hard, but I would quite like it to have something of a challenge in, so you might decide to go for 3 or 4. Okay, it allows you to choose how many colours, and further down it allows you to choose which crochet terminology. So for many of my the people that I teach in classes, they will know that I teach in US terms, because there are more US patterns. And if you look at this now, you can see that the mass amount of terminology used in these hat patterns is United States, is the US terms, and this is the reason that I think it's easy for you to learn, because then as you're searching for patterns you can find them here. So I'm going to click on United States because that's what you would be looking for. There's at an early stage there's no point in confusing yourselves with United Kingdom ones. Then this is where you can then start to think, right, actually I've only got a certain amount of yarn, so how much will it use? So this might be really useful if you wanted to make a blanket, for example. So you can then say, well, I want to make a really big hat, so I'm going to choose this one, 73 patterns. So I'm really narrowing it down, and although I've put hat, can you see that this first one is actually a little cardigan, but it's got hat in it because that's within the title there. So you may be wanting to filter it down again. So if we go back and we go to categories, clothing, so it's not any clothing that we want because we're wanting to look for a hat. Accessories, so hat and all hats, and then you can start to choose what you want. So if you wanted to go for free, so you can see now we have 49 matches. Only 13 of these are free. So if you're trying to just develop your skills and you don't really want to start paying for something, then click on free. But otherwise you can choose to purchase them. I suppose as a designer, I can see why you would want to have a free pattern, because you're not laying out any expense for something to try it out. But of course, when you then, so for example, this one, Copper the Baby Spaniel, I think this one is. Yeah, so a little hat set. Hopefully you can see the amount of work that's gone into that. So this pattern designer is asking for $7 US. This isn't unusual for it to be in US dollars, particularly if you've chosen US. But when you go through the payment process, it will take it out in UK money, and it generally tells you. So hopefully you can see here at this top right hand side where I'm circling, that is about $5.95. Okay, so if you did buy a pattern, at that point you would be adding your payment details to be able to purchase the pattern. You don't need to add a card detail in order to open an account. I suppose what I would say is sometimes I think it is worth buying a pattern. I mean, this hat with the colour changes, again, that's £5.50, but that will have taken somebody hours to have designed that, and you tend to find that you have different sizes available, more sizes available in a paid for pattern. So I have a paid for headband, and that goes from sort of toddler size right up to a large head size, because you are trying to then make sure that you get the pattern to fit for every size. You can look at age or size, and you can choose if you want it to be a baby hat or a newborn, for a child. toddler, teen, adult. So again, that's a really good way of doing it. It does help you to start like really pulling down on what it is that you're trying to do, so that you're not overwhelmed with a mass amount of hats. So if I clear all of these, if I clear everything except for crochet and hat, and the weight and the yardage, and then you see we go to 53,000 hats, and that is a lot of hats to go and look through. So that's one of the biggest searches. That's one of the ways that we tend to do the majority of searches. You can search via designer. So if you know that there's a designer you want to search for, so I shall shamelessly put my information in. So Keely Robertson, that's my own name. So that's me, and if you click on there, it'll then take you to my patterns. So I haven't got a massive amount of patterns yet on there, but I am building them up slowly. Most of mine are paid for patterns. I think this one is not a paid for pattern, but the majority of them are, but they're not massively expensive. So that's that. You can search for yarn. So if you've got a yarn and you're thinking, well, how am I going to use that? So let's find a yarn. So what we'll do is we'll do jewel spun. Jewel spun. So this is a Sidar or Sirdar. So here we go. So this is it, and you've got jewel spun with wool in a chunky. So I'm going to go for this, and there's 2,460 projects that people have made with this yarn. And what I think is really useful about this is it allows you to see what the wool looks like when it's been made up. So for something like this, which is a variegated yarn, so you've got changes of colours, and they're not necessarily all in the same order, or all in the same sort of spacing, and it really helps you to see how something looks when it's been made up. But what you can do again is you can then filter this down. So we can wear crochet. So I would click on crochet, so then it shows you only crochet products. You can then start looking at what sort of category the pattern's in. So accessories, clothes, home, toys and hobbies, components. So if we go to clothing and we see, has anybody made any clothes with that? So shall we have a look at actually we'll go for hats, because I think that's probably going to be more of those. There we go. So it then shows you how these work up, and it will tell you the name of the colour that they've used. So this one here with this octopus hat, this lady's used Midnight Sapphire, and this hat here is Nordic Noir, Northern Lights is this beret, and Crystal Quartz here for this chunk ribbed hat here. So you can see as you go along, it starts to give you an idea of how they work up. And it might be that you see a pattern, you think, actually, I really like that pattern as well. So this one here, this one looks like it's a mosaic hat. Yes, it is a pumping mosaic hat. So probably if you're just starting off, this isn't something you'll be starting with. And as the woman says, it's surprisingly simple, but it looks complicated. I do think you need to have a good understanding of what you're trying to do before you start on something like that. So that is another way that you would look and see how your work's going to look if you are struggling to think about what you might do with a particular yarn. So I think that's probably enough and to get you started, so that you can start to use Ravelry a little bit more effectively. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask me, and I will do my best to answer them. And happy hooking.